On February 26, 2022, Scott Ramsumer announced that he was sending VG Cats, his webcomic, to a mostly uncaring audience. This is remarkable. Now, not that the webcomic is ending, nor the fact that it has been running off and on for over 20 years, but the fact that there was an official announcement for Scott ending a webcomic. When you first begin to see webcomics or assorted other independent creations on the internet, there are a couple of things you learn pretty quickly. People will stop making their content at any time, generally have no set schedule, and you shouldn't believe any deadline that they give you. 2. When they apologize for not updating, realize that the effort to make an apology post is about the same to make a low effort of whatever it is that they do, and accept the fact that they will probably not make it ever again. Scott taught me a bit of those lessons. The Video Game Cats website, to use their full name once and only once, had a dynamic header making fun of the lack of consistent updates to the comic. Then his side comics, Super Effective and Adventure Log, kept a reasonable schedule until they suddenly didn't. The point I'm trying to get at here is, I'm an interested party, not because I gave money to Scott. You give money to someone in the habit of disappearing for long stretches of time once, and then tell me how inclined you are to repeat that behavior. No, it was just because I remember VG Cats from their halcyon days. Back in the mid-2000s, when the internet was less complex, edgier, and generally looked at with distrust by the vast majority of people, the same kind of people who nowadays spend their days swayed through their lives by one or another algorithm. The web was young, and so was I. The perfect age to be consumed by video games and fascinated by these people who would upload comics about them to the internet, seemingly with no higher goal than to share their feelings about them, whose jokes would offend much to their enjoyment. It's not that it was expected to last, and all things considered it didn't, but it was also never expected to end. So today, won't you join me on a trip to a time that doesn't seem so far away to those who were in middle school when it happened? 2006. When you carried a Razor in your pocket and Ludacris on your iPod. And let's take a look at the entirety of the VG Cats animated series. I promise it won't take long. This adaptation was created by Chris Bow and Bow Entertainment, a man of whom I can find nothing apart from the fact that he's Scott Ramsumer's friend, or at least he was at the time. So after the intro, which I can't use the audio from as a background because it's an instant claim in these profit-centric times, we get a cameo by Dr. Hobo and are introduced to our two main characters, Ares and Leo, played by... well, Ares is played by Marie if I still recall Process of Elimination. Leo could be any of these people. We get their introduction in the most 2006 way possible.
I can't believe you just did that. Insulting the black guy from Smallville? What's gotten into you, Leo? I mean, come on.
How was I supposed to know he was serious about being on that show? I mean, it's the middle of frickin' Kansas. Black people don't live in Kansas.
Get that right, sucker.
Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that this sounds like garbage and that everyone seems to have recorded on the inbuilt microphone of their Dell whatever, and it looks like it was animated by someone who has as much business doing animation as I have in charge of a nuclear power plant. But let me assure you, this was perfectly serviceable for Flash cartoons at the time.
Hey, George.
What's up, Ed?
Could you do me a favor?
Sure. What is it?
Remind Tom to take the firewood out of the fireplace.
Sure thing.
Yes, even the audio that sounds like if the sound technician for Saint Anger was doing Quaaludes. If you went to Newgrounds back in the day, you would find 100 of these with about the same quality and generally positive comments. So anyway, Ares and Leo are walking down the street that same way that the nun in the Blues Brothers does, when they are spotted by a police officer that...
Oh my God.
Oh, I bet your cinnamon buns there's a problem. See, we live in an age of fear and an age of terror. It's my job as a police officer to abuse the godlike powers that I have been given in a pointless attempt to oppress and single out those who are strange and different from me.
Well, it's nice to know that the image of the police never really recovered from the 90s and that we've just kept that same level of distrust and mockery ever since. Ares passes the game of Papers, Please, and Leo, on the other hand, isn't that lucky.
Holy man, Nibble! I'm gonna need backup. We got ourselves a lawbreaker here.
Huh?
Wait, what?
Props to you if you decide to use the phrase holy man nipple in conversation. Leo apparently doesn't carry his license, but he does carry a book that has a treasure map that doesn't have any reference points to where his license is. After the scene transition, we are brought back to the lair of another comic regular, Johnny Evil Guy, repurposed here as the owner of an animal shelter and sounding like if Puppet Snape had hit the sauce a bit too hard again.
Now, I want you to get plenty of rest, because I'm going to kill you soon. And I want nice, big, energetic screams as you're being savagely slaughtered, worse than Michael Jackson's career. Okay?
And he's written just about as subtle. Wait, no, back the fuck up. Well, now I don't want that print anymore. Also, that's just the Book of Mormon, isn't it? Ares is watching the cast of Family Guy pretending to be the A-Team when she gets a phone call.
I'd just like to tell you that Leo Leonardo has just claimed you know the location of his license. You have 3 hours to bring in his license, or else I'll kill him, skin him, and sell his fur on eBay. TTFN, that's all for now.
Crap. I thought I planned to watch a Clone High marathon today, too.
Well, it's nice to know that she seems to be very well prepared for what's going to happen over the next 20 years. And that's it. No joke, this is how the episode ends. It was this style at the time, at least for the animations I found between Digimon and cheekily sneaking an episode of South Park here and there. So now we get to part 2. Just kidding, there isn't a part 2. Anyone who was expecting a part 2 clearly never understood the underlying ethos of VG Cats or is yet in the process of learning lessons 1 and 2. So, as much as I followed the webcomic back in the day, preparing for this video is the first time I saw this, and honestly, I can see why there wasn't a continued effort. It's 2006. The first episode of the Angry Nintendo Nerd drops that April, and YouTube is about to become the new Newgrounds for quirky entertainment. Over the next few years, animation on the internet will enter a dark age where only the most talented, dedicated and resourceful will survive. This was never going to be successful, partly because it was fan-made in all of the worst ways, and partly because it would take a lot more effort than a webcomic, and that would require either more consistent commitment from Scott, or for Bo and everyone else to apply a lot more effort. It's 2022 now, and VG Cats got 11 new strips over the last 5 years, with math telling me that Scott averaged 18 strips a year throughout the entire run. Scott is clearly doing something else to support himself financially. His schedule and approach to his comics means that in all likelihood VG Cats will be swallowed alongside so many things on the collective lack of memory of the pre-YouTube days of the internet. A shame because, entirely aside from the content itself, and with an admission that the writing did indeed become less what it was on the original strips, Scott's art evolution is indicative of where either this or one of his other projects could have ended up. All that is left is for the farewell comic he announced to come along. But who are we kidding? There's a pretty good chance that the farewell comic will simply never come out.